Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of Pedal Pushers.
Is it the Pedal Pushers or just Pedal Pushers?
I think just Pedal Pushers.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Zach Broyles, and
This is Matthew Timmons. What's up?
I stole him, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's do it. Back on the pod.
Mine. He's mine
Yeah, I'm all yours, baby.
now. So, Matthew, tell the fine folks listening what the Pedal Pushers.
Yeah.
Pedal Pushers podcast. Maybe it is the Pedal Pushers podcast is all about.
I mean, we could just kind of see how it works, see how people talk about it. So what we wanted to do on this show was, you do a lot of stuff already. You got Dipped in Tone, you do live streams, you do, you're all over the place in the media.
There's too much of me.
You're a media. So I'm sitting here. Let's give the people more Zach, but I wanted it to be more intimate, more about the inner workings of Mythos, just
Right.
sort of all the neat stuff, kind of, what I used to do.
We're gonna hang out and take our shirts off.
It's gonna get nuts, but I want it to be just about, sort of the daily, stuff that's going on, pedals we're working on, gear that we're playing, talk a little bit more about just, the team here at Mythos.
Right. And eventually we're gonna have we'll have Mac and we'll have Jeff on and do that whole thing. But I think the name Pedal Pushers is just because we now are, well, I have been, but now both of us are pedal pushers.
We are pedal pushers. And, I think that I didn't realize, how many pedals and how into it I actually was.
Yeah.
Until I started here and I was like looking back and I keep everything and I got buckets, dude.
Buckets.
I've got so many pedals. It's ridiculous.
You have a bigger pedal board than I've had a bigger pedal board.
Yeah.
But I haven't had a pedal board as big as your current board for a long time.
And that's a whole nother topic because I got two boards now and I love my small board at home. So that'll be a huge part of the Pedal Pushers is sort of, like exploring that space and, sort of, figuring out just how to navigate just an amazing amount of stuff that's out there.
Oh my gosh.
Not only from us, but from everybody.
There's so much stuff.
It's crazy.
So much stuff.
Yeah.
But today's episode is about
pickups. So we're going to start this whole new podcast out where we're going to push pedals. And the first episode is going to not be about pedals.
Not at all.
So why is that, Zach?
Well, because I have been working on pickups. So a short history, I tried winding them myself.
I thought you were doing great. I really did.
I made a few and some of them sounded okay, but the fine folks at Porter said, hey, we can make pickups for you and not charge an arm and a leg. And so they did. And now we released the humbucker set. It did very well.
Yeah, it's great.
And the next obvious thought to me was to do a Strat set.
It wasn't obvious to everybody.
No,
because you're not known as a Strat guy at all, really.
No, but I thought, of the guitars that are most modified and upgraded, and arguably probably the most played instrument,
it's the most popular guitar of all time.
Yeah, is the Stratocaster. Yeah. So I thought, let's do a Strat set. So we are doing a Strat set. I've teased it. I've played them on live streams. People have heard them, but they're going to be coming out
as you hear this, probably.
Yeah,
I think we're going to try to do some synergy. Drop the pod. Drop the pickups, drop our pants.
That's right.
all of them.
The intimacy he was talking about earlier. Yes. But yeah, so I'm working on a Strat set. We're calling it the EXP set.
Figure it out.
Yeah, it's not that difficult.
No hints.
They're different. They're a different sort of Strat set that or S type. Can we say Strat? I mean, we could say Strat.
We could say Strat. I don't know if we can use it in any of our merchandising materials.
No, we cannot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're going to be out, and I think people are really going to dig them. But as a companion to the release of these pickups, we're going to talk about some of our favorite Stratocaster sounds.
And it's set me down a spiral here.
We have very different...
Of trying to figure that out, because I think there's a lot of it, like, where you're, okay, I have an idea of, like, the classic Strat guys and what I like, and I wanted to, of course... do a deeper dive and find some stuff that was maybe not as obvious. And then also when you're doing that deep dive, you find out, oh, that wasn't a Strat.
Right. Yeah.
So that's fun.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing because there's so many famous Strat players that you see like live videos of and recordings of. And of course, you can tell what guitar they're playing, but in the studio,
yeah,
I don't know. Sometimes you don't know.
You play all kinds of things to get the sound that you want.
That's right. So I went a more obvious route, but why don't you kick us off with one of your favorite Strat sounds?
Well, I think that the very first person that came to mind for me was John Frusciante.
Oh, okay, of course.
And that's an obvious one. I mean, there's the classic guys you can list, and he's obviously very influenced by guys like Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. But for me, being an impressionable 12-year-old boy getting Blood Sugar Sex Magic and being very worried that his parents were going to take it away from him once he actually listened to the album, and then I realized how cool my dad was. Then knowing, like, I think a lot of it for me was, sort of like at the time, like not really thinking about stuff like that. Like, I don't know, like when you started to like pay attention to gear, where you're like, okay, that's a Les Paul, that's a Strat.
Right.
It was a little bit later for me, but then going back and realizing that Frusciante was definitely the first guy that I loved that was a Strat player.
Right.
And I would say the song for me would be Soul to Squeeze, which is not an album cut. It was a single that they put out on the Coneheads soundtrack in 1993. Did you see the Coneheads movie?
Of course. I remember the Coneheads. I have fond memories of watching the Coneheads when I was a kid.
That tone on that song is so that it was the Blood Sugar Sex Magic era, all recorded with Rick Rubin in 91. They had a lot of singles that didn't make it onto the record, even though that album has 18 tracks.
Right.
But Soul to Squeeze, I think, has a very warm part in my heart. I love the way that sounds.
We're going to have to make a Spotify playlist for this because I might have heard, I've seen Coneheads, but I don't know. It's been a long time since I've watched. Yeah, I don't know if I know that song.
And I think it's like, it's one of those things where, I could go obvious with Under the Bridge, which is very, obviously,
it's iconic.
Very strategy. It's a similar idea and very similar, like, kind of style and tone, but it's a little bit more, I had to pick something, I think, a little bit more off the beaten path.
Sure.
On that one.
Yeah. So to back up a little bit, is that when you first started realizing like, oh, that's a Strat, that's a Les Paul?
That was my question. That was my thing, was that I kind of don't know.
No?
Like I remember, like trying to figure out like what guitars people were using and going like, it was a lot later, which is funny enough because, my dad was in the industry, and anyone let's listen to the other podcast stuff that I've done, previously, I've talked a lot about that, but I'm trying in my brain to remember. It was probably just a little bit later when I finally started, because I started playing bass pretty soon. So I wasn't really paying as much attention to the guitar stuff until a little bit later on. So I think it's like looking back later on when I finally started to, kind of put those pieces together.
Sure. I think for me, I'm just going to, I'll come out of the gate with Are You Experienced?
Yes.
I picked albums.
I could say the whole Blood Sugar Sex Magic era.
Right.
Because there's a couple, I had a couple more notes on stuff that he did on that record that I really liked, Stratty stuff on there besides that song. But,
right.
Yeah.
But like the Hendrix thing, that was really informative. I grew up, my first guitar was an S-type guitar, and I loved that sound way more in my youth than I still like it. It's weird how like playing a Strat makes me play a totally different way than how I normally approach a guitar.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that whole album was influential on me, and it's funny, like I remember there was a moment when I was in high school. I'd only been playing guitar for a couple years, maybe just a year. Yeah. And they had this, they had the monitor or the TVs in every classroom, and they would show videos and like do the student news thing that had I can't remember. You were probably that was probably a little bit after your time, like having like the news channel for like high school students.
Yeah, I don't remember. I was cavemen. I'm much older than you.
We had ham radios.
Yeah.
But the students put together like a thing where they made like a music video, and there was a kid and he played some Hendrix tune.
Yeah.
And he played a Les Paul. And I was watching it and I was like, that doesn't sound right. Because that's all he had. He had a Les Paul. I was like, that doesn't sound right at all. And all the other kids were like, man, he sounded just like Jimi Hendrix. I was like, he like played it right, but he didn't sound like him.
So that's when you had put it together.
Yeah. And everyone was like, you're a moron. I'm like, no, I don't think I am.
No, I think this doesn't make any sense.
But the Axis album to me that's my favorite Hendrix stuff. And just the the guitar sounds on that record is so quintessential Jimi Hendrix, and so you can tell that. I mean, are you experienced? Of course, it's set a benchmark for guitar tone. But for me, Axis set something for in my brain on.
Is there a particular part? Is it like Castles Made of Sand?
I like Castles Made of Sand. Or now my mind has gone blank on all the track listing on Axis. Let's pull it up. You say something.
I will talk. So my introduction to Jimi Hendrix was by Smash Hits.
Right.
Did you?
Oh, Spanish Castle Magic.
Spanish Castle
Magic. That's
yeah,
that and like If 6 Was 9 and stuff like those songs are some of my favorites.
Yeah.
And Wait Until Tomorrow.
The one thing that I think, and this is something that I think is interesting, and this might be like, being a musician brain and being around musicians my whole life. But one thing that I found was really interesting is going back to listen to Jimi Hendrix and noticing how short all the songs are.
Yeah, well, they're made for the radio.
And they're made for radio, and knowing that like every version I've ever heard of Little Wing is like 15 minutes long, and the version on the record is like 2 minutes and 25 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. So like, and I know that he started to stretch in
Band of Gypsies and stuff.
Band of Gypsies and stuff to be able to do the longer jammy stuff. But it's just funny, like I've never heard like a version of these songs that are the actual length of the song because everybody wants to jam on the Jimmy stuff.
Right. And I think Jimmy is one of those artists that has influenced so many people that I think we think of a lot of Hendrix songs as not how Hendrix played them, but like, Voodoo Child, often we think about the Stevie Ray Vaughan version. That version and we kind of forget how Jimmy actually played it. And he has such a unique approach to
that's like the old bit where you're like, everybody doesn't do an impression of like the president. They do the most famous impression of them.
They do the Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, they do Dana Carvey's George Bush instead. And so, going back and listening to that stuff. I mean, do you still listen to a lot of Hendrix? Like, is it in the regular rotation for you?
I go through phases. I go through seasons of music.
Yeah, I was super into it when I was like 18.
Yeah.
When I was like, I listened to Smash Hits. That's where my dad let me borrow Smash Hits because he had that record in the car. And then when I finally started buying a bunch of CDs myself, I kind of went through and bought all the originals.
Sure.
And started listening to it quite a bit. Because it's a bedrock. If you're going to be a guitar player and you're going to be into music, it's like you got to go through the Jimmy phase at some point.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people I think younger generations might rag on him a little bit and say, because like, oh, he's sloppy or whatever. And so many people have talked about that, but
sloppy.
There's been so many releases that have come out.
You're going to hear so much stuff.
Yeah, and most of that stuff was not done because you listen to all the studio records because there's three.
Yeah,
and they're they're great and they're not sloppy because he was in the studio and he was focused, but he wasn't cutting demos or just trying stuff, or it wasn't like some terrible live recording. But you listen to that live in Maui, and it was actually a really good live recording, and it's pretty awesome. Like hearing him. Like,
well, it's a testament to how much people want of Jimmy that we can go back and they basically just put out everything they possibly could.
Yeah.
Because people wanted as much as possible.
Sure.
But as far as me, I didn't have Jimmy on my list. Not that you could easily do. You just do a top 5 Jimmy. But I would say my favorite, the one that always stuck on my head, was Third Stone from the Sun. I really like the melody on that.
Yeah.
It's just really pretty.
It's
and
great.
It's fun to jam to. And I don't know how stratty that is, do air quotes as far as, because I got kind of stuck a little bit thinking about this because I wanted to do I pick stuff that's like very stratty, or is it just stuff that happens to be on a Strat? Right.
Well, I think the Strat is capable enough to be able to do everything, but it does have, there's something about it that you can't, I don't know, you can't really escape the sound of a single coil, a 3 single coil Strat. It's like, it is its own character.
It is. Yeah.
Well, what's next on your list?
All right. So number 2, I had Overseas by Jason Isbell.
Right. And you told me to listen to that.
I did.
It's very stratty.
That one's on New Ones on his last record that came out in Reunions. It came out in 2020. But the reason I picked it is because I've had a chance to hear it live a couple times at the Ryman. And in my opinion, that's the best sounding guitar, which he's played Red Eye
Right.
both times, and I've seen him 4 times, but since this song came out, but both times that night I thought Overseas was the best sounding song. He plays it on a 56 Strat,
Right.
and the tone is the best live tone I've ever heard in my entire life.
Man.
Is that, I mean, and one thing that I do is I do a little, in my head, this is the way to go, is that I go to the last show on the Rhyme and Run, because I figure that it's the sound is dialed in, right? You go to night 1, I mean, they leave their stuff there for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked the last one on purpose because I figure it's going to be the best sounding show.
Yeah.
And that's by far, I mean, the first time I heard it, I was like, this is unbelievable, just unbelievable.
Man,
perfect tone.
The last, let's see. I don't think it was the last time I saw John Mayer, but the time before that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know which tour it was. It was
like which record cycle it was.
Yeah, I don't remember. But he came on stage and played with he played a song he wrote that day with Chris Stapleton. And,
okay.
It was pretty cool. But when he walked out, he had his 62 or whatever vintage Strat,
mm-hmm.
and he was playing a Dumble and his J Mod PRS amp.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, there's moments, and it was probably like that for you seeing Jason, where you're like, damn, I need a Strat. Like you hear those sounds, just like it overwhelms you with how musical it is.
Well, I think this is sort of where we start getting into the not controversial part of the conversation, but is there something to be said for the way that the single coil Strat sound translates into an experience when you're hearing it live to be superior to other guitars or other stuff? Is that something that you would even approach that topic? I'm not saying it is, but I think it's an interesting thing to kind of explore when you talk about tone. You talk about sort of the openness and expressiveness and the range that you can get on a single coil guitar. Yeah,
because I mean, there's a lot of natural compression that happens with the humbucker, and there's a lot of things that happen.
Yeah,
in that sort of pickup construction that they have a bit of a ceiling.
Yeah,
and not all the time.
Yeah,
but a single coil, especially like a Strat, it's just it's the most simple. It's not the most simple pickup, but it's one of the most simple pickups it could. Yeah, construction it could be.
Yeah, and this is me not saying that. Well, clearly Strats are better sounding. It's just an interesting thing that for somebody this whole life has never really approached. Like my first guitar that I ever bought was a Strat.
Yeah,
and I bought it because I saw Pete Townsend playing a Strat in 2000. And I just thought it looked awesome, and he looked awesome, and it was fun. But there wasn't really any thought behind it, right? Of because it's early on in your guitar buying career. Right. But since then, I've never really looked at Strats because it doesn't feel like me as a guitar player. It's only been very recently that I've started to approach the idea of playing them again, because I feel like even at 42, I'm learning more about myself as a guitar player, and I'm starting to realize that a lot of my hang-ups with the Strat was the fact that it's so iconic that I feel like I get trapped into thinking about it a very, very, very narrow way.
Well, yeah, and that's part of why I got away from playing Strats, because I had a John Mayer Strat that I, when we got it, my dad, it was like my college graduation gift, and my dad bought it for me, and I went and played every Strat at Guitar Center. I played everyone, Custom Shop, Squire, it didn't matter. And that one was just like, oh, this one suits me. And I shouldn't have sold it, but I toured that guitar and played it, and just kind of got over it after I discovered how much I liked, a shorter scale double humbucker guitar.
Yep.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing, but it's weird how, I've definitely had those moments with humbucker guitars where I go, oh gosh, that's perfect. This sounds great.
Yeah.
But there's been a few times where I've heard people playing Strats or Strat style guitars, and it does affect me in a different way. And even if I didn't have one, like a humbucker guitar, I don't know, it's kind of strange. Oh, that sounds great, but I don't immediately want to go run out and buy that. But then you hear someone play a Strat, and it's just like, whoa, it sounds like, someone's ringing bells.
Well, I think, and that's sort of the road that I've gone down, and I think it has a lot to do with Overseas and seeing Jason play that song and going re-triggering my brain of oh, that's really beautiful. I think that there's a very specific idea of when I think Strats, I think of Yellow Ledbetter or
Right.
Lenny, or this very kind of narrow-minded sort of idea of what they do.
Well,
And that's a hang up that I might have, when you're thinking about certain kind of players and certain kind of things. And then when you kind of do that deep dive and you go like, Sultans of Swing,
right,
or something like that.
100%.
And it's like whenever I pick up a Strat, there would be like, I feel like, well, that's how you have to play this. And then, I think you need to kind of sit with it a little bit and think about it a different way and think about all the different things that thing can do.
Yeah.
And it'll open your mind, and when I was over at Novo and we were prototyping the Idris, that was a very eye-opening thing for me to get to kind of like dig in and sort of like explore what it means to be a Strat style guitar.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want it to sound like that, it kind of has to be like that.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's so I'm much more open to it, at this point. So I really want one.
Let's go get a 50s one. Let's go get a real one.
And I can put the new Mythos pickups in it.
What a crime.
I'm just
so let's see. Next on my list, and I listened to this again, and my list is so lame. Like, it's
why would you do that?
Well, it's just so prototypical, like Strat, like song. I mean, not.
Well,
all of them.
you're not. I mean, I didn't try to be contrarian here.
Right. No, I know. but like when you think like, oh man, Zach's gonna really drop some knowledge, and it's like, oh, it's the same old stuff that everyone's talked about. But anyway,
it's the same old stuff for a reason, because it has endured.
Well, so my next pick would be Stevie Ray Vaughan live at Montreux, 1982. That's when he wasn't out of his mind, because when he went back, I think it was like 85 or something. When you watch that the live concert performance, he is. I don't know if he's drunk. He's on something.
He's in it to win it.
Yeah, he is. He's sweating hard, and not because it's hot.
Yeah. You watch the behind the music on Stevie Ray Vaughan, the old VH1 behind the music?
I don't know if I ever saw that.
There's some stuff in that.
Oh yeah,
that he did. Yeah, just go ahead if you haven't watched it. See if you can find that on YouTube.
It's probably on YouTube.
It's very good.
But I remember seeing that, and I do have a specific song. It's the first track of that concert. It's Hideaway, which is a Freddie King tune, and he walks out, and it's just an instrumental thing, and he's playing number one, just his classic thing through whatever, a Vibrolux or something. If you don't know the story behind that album, Montreux Jazz and Blues Festival, Stevie got booked, and they put him on the night when it was supposed to be like an acoustic folk performance.
Oh,
and he walks out with his plethora of amps all turned up to 10 and a Strat and a wah-wah pedal, and just scared the hell out of everybody. But you can hear all the booing after every song and before song. It's really, when you watch it, you can see just utter defeat on his face.
Oh man. But it still sounds great.
Oh, he's just trying to like prove himself.
Yeah.
And win these people over. But Hideaway, like hearing that and just the attitude and the personality that he lends to that instrument.
Yeah.
That was a pivotal moment for me. I remember getting the live, because I knew Stevie, my dad famously had nothing but greatest hits CDs.
Yes.
Which
it's awesome.
Yeah, but it's funny because, I never grew up hearing any of the other like non-singles.
Yeah, because
it was all just like the cream of Clapton, Tom Petty's greatest hits. Like all that stuff.
I had all that stuff too.
Right.
Yeah.
But Dad didn't have any of like the normal albums. He had some like LPs from like back in the day. But,
sure.
But the Stevie stuff, I was always interested in it. I think he had In Step, and I was like, this is cool. But then I saw the live at Montreux when I was 18 or 17, and I was like, oh God, that's how you're supposed to play this thing. And that was a huge moment for me. But it's funny, like as much as I enjoy that Texas blues, like really, loud Fender amp with a Strat into it, sound, I don't want to play. I used to want to play like that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that anymore, because to me, it's so hard to be identifiable as a player when you're just trying to cop that sound. Like I can't, you could hear people doing it and like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
And I don't like, I already have a handicap, and so like I want to have my own personality with whatever I do, and I have to.
I think you do though. I think that you're a unique player in that way, where I feel like even when you're doing stuff like that, But it is an interesting thing. Would you say that, speaking of Stevie, I'm trying to think of these big, broad philosophical questions when it comes to the Strat. About is the Strat the greatest live instrument ever? Yes or no, Zach? Go. But no, I asked you that earlier. But do you think that, like, when you talk about the all-time, like, people ask questions like this all the time. We might answer one later on in the show, which is, how do I get blank sounds? How do I get this sound? Do you think Stevie's the most copied? I think is the most copied sound, or is it Hendrix? Is it Gilmour? Is it Stevie? Because in my head, it's Stevie.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because it's a simple rig, so people can kind of do it. But in my head, it's like, feels like the one that's a sound that people like so much that they're like, that's the one people like, I just want to do that.
I think the most copied sound now is John Mayer.
It's John Mayer.
100%. Like and it's still like the Continuum era.
Yes.
Sound, which is, it's funny because, that was, when did that come out?
2006.
Yeah, so
Which
long
one's on
ago.
there? Is that Gravity?
That's Gravity.
Is that Gravity?
And, like Slow Dancing in a Burning Room and all that stuff.
That's great tone.
Great tone, great album, amazing playing. Like the Where the Light Is stuff is just, he reached a point in his playing that, like, really, I think, turned the page for a lot of people to notice him. But I mean, like, people still definitely are trying to get Stevie's tone and Hendrix's tone and everybody, Angus Young, like anybody. There's someone out there trying to copy it. But I think
I was just thinking about it, and I always like thinking about it like that, where you're like, what would be like the guy, like the most, where people are like, that's just, and it feels like John. Like nowadays, right?
Yeah. Because not just because
it's more modern.
Well, but it's not even just because of like the Continuum stuff now. Like you look at like how he started playing in like Dead and Company, and his approach, and like when you see a lot of newer players like playing solo-y stuff, like their leads are very reminiscent of how John played, and his and the rhythm and stuff too. But moving on, So I think what's next for you?
Number 3, I have Cliffs of Dover.
Oh yeah,
by Eric Johnson.
I remember seeing the Austin City Limits.
1988, baby. Sgt. Pepper's Eric Johnson.
He's wearing the band jacket.
It's terrific.
And I think it was on at like a Walmart or something. Like the DVD was on, and I was walking by, and I saw that, and I was like, "Whoa, what?
What is this?"
Yeah.
So it's very, 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 like close personal memories for me, because right when the album came out, I think it came out in 1990. The actual record with the Cliffs of Dover on it.
Let's see.
I think it's 1990, because he's a perfectionist, and I think it took a while, because that song had been banging around for quite a bit before that record came out. And my dad, of course, shout out to Pops, because I wouldn't be sitting here without Pops. He's going to get mentioned constantly on anything that I do, and we would listen to that in the car, because Dad would play Satriani, and Dad would play Van Halen and everybody, right? I stole Smash Hits and Zeppelin 2 from him when I was 12, right?
Right.
As soon as I got into Nirvana and Pearl Jam, I'm like, what else is there? And he's like, here's Zeppelin 2 and here's Smash Hits. I was like, yes, because it all made sense to me. But we would drive, and my dad would have his cassette tapes, and we'd always listen to Eric Johnson. And that melody in my head, like, I can't escape, like, thinking about sitting in the car in the backseat of the van, and like driving in California, and we'd be, we lived in Central Coast, so we would drive a section when we'd be driving to like my grandma's house, and it would be the ocean. And I remember looking out and hearing Eric Johnson playing Cliffs of Dover and looking out at the ocean, and like, it's like a dream. It's like, it feels like some coming of age movie.
It's not Dover, but it's close.
But it's close. And so like, there's like a lot of just beautiful memories for me of like that, how beautiful that song is, and how amazing his tone is. It's incredible. And just, thinking about that, thinking about my dad and being 10 years old, and it just feels good. It's just a great memory. And so that song just makes me really happy.
Yeah. I remember like so many people seeing the Austin City Limits performance, and being just enamored by the whole thing, like the build up at the start, and like it's just it's insane. But then I bought Avia Musicom, and I was like, I don't know about the rest of this.
I would say it's an interesting thing. It feels like that's a peak. Like literally, like he just absolutely just had something there with that song. and I think the rest of it's cool. But that's a strong peak.
Yeah,
from an artist.
I mean, Eric is such an amazing player and talent and stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, like thinking about that, like who had those moments where, I mean, who knows how many people were influenced by just that one song. Just
yeah.
It's like that thing gets stuck in your brain.
Oh, it's incredible.
But, if you said, people could play that or, play stuff like that and say, oh, play Desert Rose. You're like,
yes.
So
it's an interesting, I mean, I've heard a lot of it, and my dad would buy all the Eric Johnson stuff. I think it's definitely an interesting thing when it's there's the guitar player guys, like that era of guys, like, obviously the G3 guys, Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. And when those songs sort of break through into just normal mainstream guitar players versus guitar players, people that want to listen to, like guys who are making records for guitar guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And my dad had like a really good mix of both of those. We listened to, Zeppelin and Van Halen and and then, Buddy Guy and, all that stuff. And then we'd also listen to like the guitar guys. So I like the fact that I got, exposed to all that stuff too, which is really cool.
Right.
Did you ever see Eric live?
Nope. No, I've seen him. I mean, I haven't seen him in like a concert. I've sat in a room with him and watched him try acoustic guitars.
Yeah.
And it was some of the most impressive guitar playing I have ever seen. Where like, there's moments where you watch him and it's just like, it's all pentatonics. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And or it's not pentatonics, but it's all fives.
Yeah.
It's, that sort of like counting thing is so like that is part of his sound. And like that's really all I had kind of associated with him as a player. And then he was there with some other folks, Steve Warner, and him came into Carter when I was there, and they were just trying old pre-war Martins, and he was just sitting and just like flat picking.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe how good he was at something so different
than what he normally. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I mean, like flat picking, bluegrass style playing is just, a totally different approach, but how he plays chords and stuff. It's just like for an acoustic guitar, I think if he made just an acoustic album, and he might have.
Yeah, we got to do a deep dive in the discography. Yeah.
I would be really interested in seeing like what that sounds like, because it was, my jaw hit the floor. It was crazy.
I mean, it's like it's certain players, especially guys that are at that level, they have a sound that they do, but I'm sure it's like, it's so cultivated, like, okay, here's the thing that I do over here with this thing, but to get to that level, you could do it all.
Right.
And then some guys, they have one style and that's how they play.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see kind of that I got to see him open there was a Satriani Eric Johnson thing that we did, and you were playing, I saw it in Seattle, and he did Manic Depression.
Yeah.
So to bring it back, doing the Jimmy thing, and it was awesome, but also hilarious because, the guitar playing and everything was spot on. And then it's Eric doing a singing. It's like Manic Depression, touching my, and it's like, it's Jimmy. You want some heat behind the vocals. And it's like,
need some chewing gum or something like
that. And it was just like, like it was just the juxtaposition of like the guitar playing and then the singing was pretty funny.
God, Manic Depression, what a song.
What a song.
Okay, so next on my list, I think you'll appreciate this one.
Okay.
Highway Star.
Oh,
Deep
yes.
Purple, Made in Japan.
Very cool.
The Made in Japan take on that.
Made
in Japan, if you've not listened to that album, and there's parts of it I'm like, are they dubbing this? That like this is so good.
It was so much dubbing going on back in the day.
Okay. Yeah. Because like it's
I mean, I can't confirm on that particular one because I've never gone deep dive on Deep Purple.
Right.
Deep dive on Deep Purple. There's another podcast coming soon from Zach and Matthew. Deep dive on Deep Purple. But I know I used to joke there's Thin Lizzy's famous one, Live and Dangerous.
Yeah.
And we used to joke, me and Devin used to joke it was 100% live, 50% live, 100% dangerous, because it was like you could tell. And like Ozzy used to talk Black Sabbath, like it was a lot of that stuff. Judas Priest, they all did it. So I'm not accusing Deep Purple.
Well,
but it sounds terrific.
At any rate, just Richie Blackmore's Strat sound into I don't know. I assume a Marshall, probably with the treble booster.
Yeah.
Just turned up all
Shout
the way.
out to the Cestus.
Yeah. Hey,
We got to sell something, man.
Oh my
We've
God.
gone how long have we gone? We haven't tried to sell anything yet.
We've got 35 minutes.
Pedal pushers.
But man, like I had listened to like all the early like Deep Purple stuff I had enjoyed and listened to, but I was out with Morgan and some friends back when we lived near Green Hills in Nashville, and one of our favorite things to do in spring and summer was go yard sailing.
Yeah.
Because it's all these like rich people just giving stuff away.
Yeah.
And so
Green Hills is
it's
that
a
area.
bougie part of town.
Yeah.
And we did not live in Green Hills, by the way. We lived outside of that, but we would drive over there. And I found just a Made in Japan, this at a CD at a yard sale for like $1. And I bought it and put it in the car when we were driving around. And I was just like, wow. Because, I mean, first off, John Lord playing the organ. The organ is the most demonic, heavy sounding thing. Like, you know, like people talk about how heavy guitars can be.
Oh,
the organ,
that era of organ too, and a lot of stuff was very evil.
Oh, it's so distorted and awesome.
Yeah,
but man, just like,
Highway Star is a song. I always put it in the category of songs where I think if it comes on, I might crash my car.
Highway Star, drive faster.
Oh my gosh, I am going to get pulled over. We're all going to die if that song comes on.
You're gonna blow another battery in that CRV.
Oh my god, it cost me $300.
$300?
No, the battery was like $185.
Oh,
and then
got it
done. I got an oil change. Yeah, battery in my CRV. I gotta get a new car.
Yeah. We'll find you something.
I gotta get a minivan. I got the child number 2 coming in 6 weeks, Zach.
Man,
and we're potty trading the first one. What was I thinking? Why did you tell me?
I don't know. I only have one. So
yeah, why didn't you tell me? No, I'm excited. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
But yeah, if you've never listened to that version, his solo on that, it dubbed or not.
You feel like Richie doesn't get the credit he deserves? I don't hear him get brought up as much.
No, I think you're right, because I think everyone talks about like Tony Iommi and Jimmy Page as like the inventors of heavy metal, but Deep Purple invented heavy metal.
Yeah, he doesn't just get, you got all the Rainbow stuff, which is killer as well. Like I think he just for whatever reason he just is on that like and I don't know. It's hard.
Maybe
to tell.
because he's a jerk.
Nobody likes him. Hey,
I mean, like historically, it is, as far as a band leader and stuff, he's not a very nice guy.
Okay. So people, doesn't have the run that everyone else has.
But so far as proficiency at the instrument, he definitely doesn't get his day.
Yeah.
But I still hold fast that the early Deep Purple stuff, because it came out in the late 60s, is the most heavy metal, because you have Ian Gillan screaming, like the high-pitched yell, singing stuff that surely people did it before him, but like who did it and got famous doing it?
Yes.
So
I love it.
What's next for you?
So speaking of heavy metal and going down that road, number 4, I have Overkill by Motorhead, Fast Eddie Clarke.
Yeah.
And I picked this one definitely because I wanted to stretch a little bit as far as thinking about the Strat, not as just this, kind of a traditional Stratty instrument, talking about Jimi Hendrix and John Mayer and Steve Ray Vaughan and that stuff. But I always think that this is an interesting one. I picked Overkill because it's very jammy and very cool. And I love the idea of like what, all the guitar players that played in Motorhead, but especially the early ones and the early albums with Fast Eddie Clarke, because you have this just absolutely thunderous lead bass going on, and you have to figure out how to make your guitar like stand out and work. And I think that's a reason why a Strat really works in this scenario. Yeah. Even with he used a humbucker in the bridge.
Okay.
Which I know that is a whole other topic, because that was my favorite part of the Dipped in Tone you did with Paul Reed Smith, which is arguing about whether or not if it's a Strat. And Paul's like, it's a Strat.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that's a really good question, because Strats are obviously been modded to hell and back over the last 70 years now.
Oh my
When's the 70th anniversary of the Strat?
It came out in 1954.
Oh, 54. Right. So we're getting close.
Yeah.
Cannot wait to see what Fender's going to do next year.
It's going
to be crazy.
A gold one or something.
Oh, it'll be dipped in fucking unobtainium.
Platinum.
Yeah, platinum. But I think that's a great question about that. So, I mean, obviously getting a humbucker in the bridge and knowing that there's a huge swath of Strat style guitars that happened after that are basically it's an S style guitar, but with a humbucker that was a genre of music and a style, because you get the thicker, heavier, bridge sound, but then you can also do all the soloing with a nice clear, single coil pickup to cut through, and have that openness.
It's weird how a humbucker in the bridge of a Stratocaster like shaped instrument, or with that sort of bridge and scale length, kind of gives it this weird. It's a bit anonymous. Like it's hard to like peg down what that sound is.
Yeah, like how is that different than say a Les Paul with a humbucker? Because you got obviously completely different woods, completely different construction, completely different bridge. But you could drop a PAF style humbucker in a Strat, and then what would make you kind of go to that sound, not just for the other positions, but like that style. Yeah, it is so different, because you look at like Eddie. Mm-hmm. So he had the PAF from a 335. Yes.
In his red striped guitar, which I guess for Van Halen 1, it had a normal Strat style bridge. He didn't have a Floyd Rose on it yet.
Yeah, because that would have been 78.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that just sounds like him. It doesn't sound like a Les Paul. It doesn't sound like a Strat. It just has its own unique voice, and it's just a combination of those things. I think it's interesting when people do that, because then you have to really dive in.
Yes.
And like it's all on you at that point, because like now it really kind of, you know what I'm trying to say? It's interesting how it adds, I think it totally takes away the stratiness of the instrument.
Well, absolutely.
And it lends itself to being a little bit more, I want to say having less character, but it's not exactly what I mean. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think what you're getting at is the sort of like very identifiable sounds. Like, what are the very identifiable sounds that you get out of a Stratocaster style guitar? And if you're talking about like the way that bridge sounds and the way the sort of second position sounds, I mean, that goes away quite a bit when you've got a humbucker in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're still going to get some of that feel to it, but it's going to go away. So and if I handed you an HSS guitar versus handing you a normal, SSS style guitar, you're going to, in your head, play them completely differently.
I will. Yeah. Cause the sound of the bridge, like you're talking about with Motorhead, when I've played in bands with Strats, it's funny, especially if you're playing in a multiple guitar band. Mm-hmm. I tend to, if I'm playing in a room, I hardly am ever on the bridge pickup, unless it's, unless the moment strikes me. I'm normally on the neck or in the middle. I really like the middle position. But when I've been in bands, I've just always lived on the bridge, because that's how you get heard. Yeah. That's the only way.
You cut through. And it is interesting to think about, when you think about like the most modded guitars there is, it's taking the bridge pickup out of a Strat and taking like the neck pickup out of a Tele. Yeah. It's been done forever. Yeah. Right. And that's it. But what is it about like the bridge pickup of a Strat that makes people kind of get scared and shy away? Well,
there's no, traditionally now they've kind of remedied this, but there's no tone pot on it. In the vintage ones. Yes. Old ones only had 3-way switches, but the fact that there's no tone pot, so you're getting
you're naked, bro.
You are all
naked.
There is no resistance apart from that potentiometer, so that pickup is going through the pot right to the output jack, so it is pokey. Yeah. Which is,
it's scary as if you're a player that doesn't know what to do with that.
Right. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the compression thing of a humbucker, because the fact that there's no tone pot, it even further opens up how expressive the instrument is, and how much of your pick and your hand are sent to your amplifier. Yep. So you are very much naked and exposed. Yeah. As a player. And it is brash and kind of hard to handle in someone's.
Well, this is me being an untechnical rube, and that's my role on this podcast, is the untechnical rube, the emotion engine of Matthew Timmons, as I like to call it. And I'm learning so much, even just over the last almost 2.5 months since working for you. I mean, it's been amazing because I just ask you a million questions every day. How much classic tone that we're talking about from any of these guys is bridge pickup Strat?
I'd say probably very little.
And that's an interesting thing to think about, right? Like you're talking about the masters, Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, modern guys like John Mayer, John Frusciante, Eric Johnson. How much of that is played on the bridge pickup of the Strat? I think,
the Strat is one of those things that if you're listening to someone play that style of guitar, and Stevie's like one of the perfect examples because he's flipping the pickup selector switch constantly.
Yeah.
That you can hear him kick down to the bridge, and it's blatantly obvious what's happening
when he's playing on the bridge.
But Hendrix and a lot of people, that were inspired by him. I think the sound that you associate with that sound is the neck or pegging it in 4.
Yeah. 4 seems like, like my, again, Rube alert, right? When I think about it, it's like the shorthand is 2 is Mark Knopfler and 4 is Jimi Hendrix, right? Like there's like that very hard association with that sound. And so like, I want to learn, like who's the guy that plays in the first position on that. Like I
mean, Blackmore probably did. I mean, like it's a really,
especially if you're playing it like, in a different context. Like if I'm like a good example of it is, I'm a very, very, very aggressive guitar player. Right.
Yeah.
I hit hard. I'm the school of James Hetfield. Like that's how I played when I grew up down. You're like, Matthew, you should mix in a little up picking. I'm like, no, down picking is the best. But especially when I'm trying to like learn how to actually play Billy Gibbons riffs, because I was playing Just Got Paid, and you're like, you could do some up picking, Matthew.
Right.
I'm like, no. I think I learned how to play it from Mastodon's version, which is probably mostly down picking. But see, I'm learning so much from you, Zach. But the point is that if I'm playing like I can make a bridge pickup, because when we were prototyping, the Idris, shout out to the boys over at Novo, and playing like other Strat style guitars, like I can make them sound heavy metal.
Oh yeah,
because of the way I played, and then you just sculpt your tone. As we will get to on our question, is like you could figure out how to play anything on anything if you've got 20 pedals and some good tone controls on your amp. Like you can make it sound and you can make it work.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so you had Motorhead.
I did. Yes.
And then my last one is a perfect segue.
Oh, it is.
Pink Floyd, Live at Pompeii, Echoes.
So we were into the David Gilmour section of this podcast.
Yay! Yeah. So I love Pink Floyd, especially the early stuff. Anything with Roger Waters. Not a big Syd Barrett guy, personally.
Is there a faction of Pink Floyd fans that are into both, or is it kind of like
there's like 3 eras now?
Yeah.
So
totally. But is there is that like a clear delineation, you think, of people that are into both? Or like, I'm a Syd Barrett guy, or I'm a, David Gilmour guy, or like all of it because Roger Waters is the greatest of all time.
I think there's people that appreciate, the classic lineup, and then some of those people still really like David Gilmour. They like the classic lineup because of David and his guitar playing, and not so much of his, songwriting, because that was mostly Roger.
Yeah.
All the stuff that I assume most of the stuff we remember is Roger. I know
Roger.
But
if we ask Roger, Roger will say that it was Roger.
Yeah. But I have met some people that are like, I love Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd. I'm like, okay, I get it, but it's just not for me. But anyway,
sure.
The Live at Pompeii the album and like the movie they made,
which you can watch on YouTube.
Is it on YouTube?
I think so.
Well, it's. I mean, I'm sure you can watch the Echoes clip.
Yeah.
It's so, just fantastic. These 4 dudes in the middle of like a Coliseum thing, just making music. But David playing his Strat into the fuzz face with a wah, and his Benson Echo Rec into his high watts.
There it is.
It's just like,
I mean, you like it if you could just rattle off the rig that quickly.
Man, I watched
that's
it
very
so
famous.
many times. Oh, it's so famous. I mean,
it's very famous.
I spent many hours as a or early 20 something on Gilmore-ish.com. Did you ever go?
Trying to figure out.
Oh, he had breakdowns of everything, every pedal change.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that like this is kind of, being, a newer thing for me to like actually kind of, dive into that a little bit.
Right.
I think that, trying to like, replicate sounds as best possible. It's not necessarily something that I've really tried to do at all during my playing career, is figure that out. And I think you being more interested, I think obviously that's a huge part of guitar and gear fandom is people doing that, but it had never really been like necessarily on my radar to kind of figure that kind of stuff out, which I'm getting more into now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a very big deal for me to know what people used. And I think that came a lot from the time I started playing guitar, because that was in the back of the Guitar Worlds or one of they'd have like the rig that had all the little cartoony.
Oh yeah, I remember those. Those were cool.
Yeah, and there was a whole website that had all that, and people would make their own, and there was a huge forum. That's like,
oh yeah,
that was where I spent most of my internet time back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yep.
But I don't know. I was never a kind of person to really want to copy someone outright. Mm-hmm. But when I really got into Pink Floyd, when I was about 21, 22.
Mm-hmm. And what was the trigger to suddenly like be like, I'm gonna?
I watched the making of Dark Side of the Moon, and if you've not seen that, it's watching them make that album is so crazy. And then they have interviews with everybody, and they play all their parts, and it's insane. It's so cool. That made me go, I'm going to listen to Pink Floyd more. And then for a while, I just listened to that. And that's the kind of like music listener I am. Like say, I'm going to listen to AC/DC, and that's all I listen to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, Pink Floyd for me, in David's tone and how he plays the Strat, because like, kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, like he uses a Strat, but there are many famous recordings that are not Strats at all.
Yes.
But most people think, he's just playing his black Strat.
Yeah, and I think our good buddy Brett Skull had a video about that, right? Was it the solo on
Is it Comfortably Numb? Or?
No, it's the one on oh God, why can't I remember right now? Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. He uses a
Les Paul,
the 55.
Yeah.
Right. So it's P90.
Yep.
And I would have picked that song as my favorite Gilmour guitar solo too. That's that solo, the second solo on is absolutely unbelievable.
Well, and my favorite song and my favorite solo is Money, and that's not a Strat. That's some like custom guitar that he had made, so it would have 22 frets.
And this is why, like when I teased at the beginning of like kind of going through that deep dive for and sort of exploring, I was like, okay, I absolutely adore Gilmour, and that was sort of which one am I going to pick?
Right.
And I was like, it was like a minefield. I was like, I don't want to come on this show, which I've obviously established again that I am the rube in this situation of saying the wrong thing, of like, oh, that person's using, I'm this is my favorite. I'm like, that wasn't a Strat, that was this. So I was like, I got to make sure that I pick one. So I picked Time. Off of that, and I think like that one, you can pick anything off that era, but one of the reasons why I love all that, I got into Pink Floyd finally. I remember when I was 19 years old, and that was the era I started getting all this stuff. I went through, and I would go, basically I'd buy like 2 CDs a week. By the time I moved out of my parents' house and I had my own job, and I'm like, I'm gonna started buying everything, 2 a week. Like every payday, it'd be like every Tuesday I would go and I would buy like 2. And so I was getting everything, get all the Beatles, all the Jimi Hendrix, everything. So now it's time to get all the.
So much money.
I know, I spent so much money on CDs, which I have all of them still. I have every CD I've ever owned. I've never sold anything, and but it's like at the time you're like, oh fuck, they've got the Wall used, so I can get it finally. Like that was like, today's the day I'm going to buy the Wall, whatever. But I remember distinctly, it was like 4th of July, 2000. Gosh, I'm so old. It was 1999.
There you go.
It was the 4th of July, and I remember, listening to Dark Side of the Moon. It was like where you kind of like finally broke through. It was very. I think I got so drunk in the beginning. I was 19. It was fine. I got so drunk in the middle of the day that I like fell asleep on the 4th of July and woke up at like 6, and like it was pitch black and like there's fireworks going everywhere. And I was so like disoriented the rest of the day. But I remember like sleeping in like kind of like a game room of my friend's like like uncle's house, and we just listened to it, and we left it on all night, kind of waking up in and out and like hearing it, and it was super weird.
That sounds dangerous.
It was. I was fine. It was just, it was like you're a little hungover, but like
Dorothy.
but it's like it's a dangerous record to kind of like, it's like float in and out of like being awake and asleep and listening to Dark Side of the Moon. It was like my own like weird Pink Floyd experience, but like I cannot not think of like that feeling. Like I must have fallen asleep on the pool table or something, and it was very fun. But like that, like I have like whenever I have like strong associations with stuff like that, like that's when stuff really sticks with me. So as much as I've like gotten into and listened to the other stuff, that's the one that I like the most, because there's something about that, like that like sort of dream, like, which everybody makes the bit about, Wizard of Oz and that album, but his guitar playing, like poking through all of that, like kind of being not sleepy sections, but kind of jammy and dreamlike, cosmic blues, as my dad would call it. And then punctuated by his just absolutely epic guitar solos. Like that's what makes it so good, is that build up, and then having him unleash. It's so good. Because nobody's done it better, in my opinion. Like that's the greatest like guitar soloist of all time is David Gilmour.
Because
reason
he would sing everything. That's how he wrote everything.
Yeah, so good.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the perfect segue into our next segment, the Tone Help Hotline. Oh, Matthew's got a treat.
Are we gonna do it?
Yeah.
I don't want to blow the floor. All right, it's can time. Oh, I shook it up too much.
Oh man,
did that sound good? I'm not wearing headphones.
It sounded great.
All right, shout out to everybody that loves the can. There you go.
They missed the Novo show. So the Tone Help Hotline. What we're hoping is that once we get this set up, we're going to try to set up on a podcasting platform that will let you guys leave us a voicemail, and
we're going to play it. The voicemail?
We'll play the voicemail.
All right. So we'll limit it to just one or two cuss words.
Or preferably no cuss words. We're going to try to keep it PG-13.
I was a little blue last time I worked on the podcast. So I've been pretty good so far today.
So you're doing great. You got your one in.
I think I said two.
You only had one. One F word.
I think I said shit too.
Well,
there's three.
I think that's okay.
Okay.
What we're gonna have to do, we're gonna institute a
one F word.
Yeah, and then we'll have a can, and then if you break the rule, we'll like put it towards like donuts or
like
something.
A pizza fund or something. I was like thinking about it when they did X-Men First Class. Remember that movie? And it was remember X-Men First Class?
I've seen it.
It's
but
great.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
Well, there's a famous scene in that movie where it's like a PG-13 movie. Where, but it's the part where Professor X and Magneto are recruiting everybody.
Right.
And of course they have to recruit Wolverine. And then Hugh Jackman gets to say,
get the F out of here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to use up my cuss word, but it's like they had one, you can say it like once in a movie, and I think it's PG-13, and they used it to very strong effect in that. I always loved that scene.
Perfect. So
I will try to X-Men First Class rules on this podcast.
Well, so that's what we're hoping to do with the Tone Help Hotline, and the name may change. It was going to be Tone Support, but I think that's taken.
Everything's taken.
Everything,
it's 2023. Everything's taken. There's no new ideas under the sun.
Sorry, a message on my computer distracted me. But the question that we have for this one is from I asked on Instagram, and Michael in 502 asked, possible to get Gilmour tones via Mythos Pedals? Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely. You take a golden fleece and an oracle.
Terrific.
And crank the feedback.
And there you go.
You just play it.
I mean, the other night I was just hammering on Hephaestus with the oracle. And it sounded terrific.
Yeah.
And you could do anything. I mean, any kind of fuzzy tone with an oracle, it'll work.
But I think the thing about a lot of players and getting the tones, don't ever limit yourself to like what pedals they used or what circuits they used. Mm-hmm. Focus on their guitar playing.
Yes. Focus on the technique.
Yeah. Try to get the riffs down and then like use the pedals to shape that.
Well, I think it comes back to what I was talking about earlier, unless you cut it because I was rambling, is about like, you can get, if you've got a Strat and you've got you can make that depending on the amp and the pedals that you have, you can make that work with anything. Like you can make that sound, it's hard to make it sound like a Les Paul necessarily, but like you can do a heavy metal thing. You could do anything. And I think sort of having to get so specific about like, well, what specific fuzz did David Gilmour use? What transistors were in it? Like you can get there because it's like the old joke. You can give Eddie Van Halen a Squier and a crate and he's going to sound like Eddie Van Halen. Yep. Like you can, like, that's the tools that they decided on because that's what helped them get there. But if you're if you're playing the riffs the way that they wrote them and you're trying to get there, like you just need a fuzz and a delay and you could probably do it.
Yeah, I think that so often we just get hung up on buying gear to have what our heroes have, and there's total validity in that. I've done it. Yeah. But when comping anybody's sound, just focus on how they played, and really, I think the secret to a lot of those guys, especially the heroes of yesteryear, is really focus on your right hand technique, and how they picked, and their attack of the string, and I think that's a big part of copying the sound. Like part of how I play when I want to copy Billy Gibbons playing is really how I choke up on the pick and play, and I think you just have to think about that first, and then use pedals, like you said, to accent it.
Yeah, because you'll find yourself like, and the other side of it that is obvious, but sometimes we don't think about when you're talking about copying somebody's gear is like what else are we talking about in context? Which is where it was recorded, mic placement, the board. There's so much other stuff besides just the pedal and the amp that you just kind of, I mean, we all know that because especially now that if you're deep diving into all the stuff that you're going to do, like recording on your computer and doing a Helix, like you're learning about all that stuff. Because last night I was messing with the mic placement on a preset on my HX Stomp, which is just blowing my mind that I actually give a shit about that now. But now I do, because that's interesting. Wow, that's interesting how different that sounds. Of course, that's a thing. So it's like knowing that you can't control any of that if you're trying to replicate somebody's sound. That should ease your mind a little bit. That says like, well, it's a delay and a fuzz, so I can make that happen, and then focus on technique.
Yep. I think that's any question about how to get X's tone. Just use similar sounding pedals, focus on technique, unless it's something that's totally wacky and weird, that it has to be something hyper specific.
Yeah, like if you're going to do a Tom Morello or a Jack White thing, you might need a whammy.
Or some weird tremolo or
there's
something.
A certain specific sound that might be hard to get, just by playing it straight through.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the inaugural episode of Pedal Pushers.
Is that it?
That's it.
We don't have anything else on the list to talk about? We got to push a pedal.
Oh, how about we have a pedal of the week?
A pedal of the week. We'll just have the pedal of the week that we already... Oh, wait, but we're recording this for next week, so I got to remember what I have on my list for the newsletter for next week.
Well, why don't we just say the Cestus, because we mentioned it.
We did.
The Ritchie Blackboard.
And the Cestus is doing well right now.
Cestus is hot.
And I think Cestus is hot, and
we can thank Josh Scott for that.
Thanks, shout out to Josh. Lost somewhere in Japan right now, I think.
Who knows?
I saw that on the Instagrams.
He's buying cheeseburgers and vintage capacitors,
which is very cool. I'm very jealous that they're over there having a blast.
Man,
would love to go. But the Cestus is cool because it's a unique circuit that I think that or a unique style of pedal that I think that is ubiquitous for a lot of players, but hasn't been sort of on the radar.
Yeah,
for a lot of people, like
the Rangemaster is.
We know who uses it, and we know where it's been used, but it's not sort of like, it seems so specific that it's not like, oh well, I got to have something like that on my board.
Yeah, I think so often with that circuit, everyone thinks, oh, I'm not playing, a Strat into a Vox or something. I don't need a Rangemaster, but
what are all the things that it can do besides just doing Brian May or something like that?
Well, I mean, because it has the voicing switch, which is a well known mod to that circuit.
Yep.
That you can do like more of a full frequency boost and have it be a little fatter and it just really it's really musical, and there's something about the silicon transistor that's a little more aggressive. Even when the gain knob is set low, that it feels a little more approachable.
Yeah.
So that everybody can kind of get behind it, but it still has all its weirdness.
So for you as a player, because I've messed with it a little bit, but for you as a player, like what made you, what do you use it for? What makes you reach for the Cestus and say like, here's something that I want to do. I'm going to grab the Cestus to do it. For
me, it's because my tone, my bass guitar tone is a cranked amp and an electric guitar. And then the pedals are just there to accent it. So if I'm wanting to get that mid-range boost, very cutting and like aggressive upper mid-range and treble sound, I would grab the Cestus so I could take the Marshall sort of thing or even, something like the Two Rock and just push it into cutting. And I think if I was playing in a band, I would always have it on my board, because especially if you're with another guitarist and you need to jump out, a normal full frequency clean boost would be great. But if you're trying to fight for frequency, really, hitting something that has that treble and mid forward sound and not a lot of bass, everyone's going to hear you. So for better or worse.
For better or for worse. Yeah. I like that. And also I wanted to, Pedal Pushers is the name of the show. Cestus, a great one to talk about, but this is the Strat set show.
Yes.
So want to try to, I've got to take care of the money side of this relationship. So I want to sell some shit. What would you say as far as like, if you're is there a style of player you think that would like the EXP set?
Yeah.
Who'd you recommend it for if you're looking for something that's, specific as far as tone wise? If someone's like, hey, I got a Strat, I might not be, digging the pickups, like, what would you say?
Right.
Here's what the EXP could do for you.
So while the humbucker set is like my attempt to make my idealized version of the classic humbucker, the EXP set is my one of my favorite Strat sounds, which is reverse stagger. So it has a unique balance. They're clear and have a bright or a defined bass. They have a little bit of a mid scoop, but it's not a John Mayer-y thing. It's very much a Hendrixian sort of inspiration. But to me, like that to me is like my favorite Strat sound. If you like traditional Strat sounds, if you're not a huge fan of it, or if the Hendrix sound is not your favorite go-to Strat sound, it's probably not for you. But if you already have one Strat, because a lot of people have multiples, and you have like your traditional thick, fat sounding Strat, and you want something that cuts, is chimey, and is really going to balance well with pedals, especially like fuzzes and stuff, then I think that's a good set to have. And because we well overwound the bridge pickup, you have a set that's super balanced. So a lot of people...
You have a bass plate on that bridge pickup too,
it's
right?
Bass plate, and the bobbin is completely filled with wire. So it's
we're like stuff it.
Yeah, it's like 9K, which is, a lot more resistance and a lot more output. But one of the things a lot of people complain about, you click down to a Strat bridge and just like you just disappear.
Yep.
Because even though it's bright, it's not. They're all relatively the same output.
Yep.
So the really good balance. That's my whole thing with every guitar. I want it to be balanced. But I unless like the Hendrix thing is your go-to sound, it might not appeal to you unless it's something you really want to explore, which I think everyone should. But to me, it's just that sort of classic psychedelic single coil sound that I love so much.
There you go. So get on it.
They'll be at mythospedals.com/shop.
Yeah.
We have a limited number, but if they sell well, we'll make more.
We'll do it again. Cool, man. Well, there you go. Pedal Pushers episode 1.
Yeah.
We did it.
We're going to have more stuff coming.
Yeah.
We'll set up an email.
Yeah.
So you can email us ideas.
It's great to be back. It's been a while since I've done this.
Back in the pod game.
I love it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.